Hey everybody, how's it going? Hey everyone, I have not been live in a long time, and every once in a while people ask and they're like, hey, I miss your lives. So I figured I'd just pop on. I don't have any agenda or anything like that. Nothing, no specific theme or anything, but I figured I'd hop on, see if you all have any questions, say hello. Yeah, so just here to say hi, answer some questions, see what y'all have. Hi, Aaron. I worked with him at coffee shop in Union Square back in the days. Hey everybody, Deco's here, but he's napping. Hey everybody, I figured just pop on, take some of your questions and chat a little bit, see what some of the questions are. I think the Q&A function is still here, so I'll look at some of the questions y'all have, and yeah, see how it's going. I'll mix it up with some fun questions and then also some policy questions that you might have. Let's see. How is League Ranked going? I just played Ranked for the first time in a while. It's probably I've played League in the last 6 months, but I have played League in the last 6 months, but I stopped playing Ranked for a long time. So I just started playing Ranked in the last, couple weeks, and I placed low. It's embarrassing. I'm I placed in bronze, so I have to grind my way back to silver, which is really sad. But okay, let's see. Looking at some of the other questions here. What's up, everybody? Looking at some more of your questions here. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize that they updated the Q&A that you can vote on the questions too. Let's see. Some people say, okay, how do you feel about what's going on in Union Square today? This situation is obviously really new, really fresh. It's just popped off. For people who may not know, today in New York City, there were these huge crowds, almost a riot, I think, in Union Square because a Twitch streamer said that they were going to do some giveaway, and it was just kind of chaos got unleashed. Obviously, the situation's not good. We don't want stuff like this happening. And I think it also raises really interesting questions. I think there's a lot of examples of people with really large platforms on the internet that use the internet sometimes to engage in irresponsible behavior, and it's part of this larger landscape that we see, for example, with AI or tons of other stuff in tech, where technology has evolved to a certain point, but our institutions and even just us, this isn't just about government being slow, but we collectively as a culture haven't figured out how we want to handle these things. And so I think this is going to raise really interesting questions. What happens as a result of that? Are people going to be held accountable for their online actions that may incite real world harm? It raises this whole realm of legal questions and policy questions, and then questions just for us culturally to figure out. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's see what other questions y'all have. Let's see. Thoughts on the Trump situation. This is another one that's getting a lot of likes in the Q&A. Okay, listen, Trump just got indicted by the federal government. It's bad. There's no way around that. I don't think anybody would want to wake up to a indictment entitled the United States versus you. That's not a good situation to be in. But listen, There's 4 charges. They're extremely serious. And there's been already a ton of investigation, as we saw with the January 6th hearings and investigations last year. And last year, a lot of people, when those January 6th investigations were going on, people were saying, what is this for? What is this going to lead to? Our legal system is, sorry, Deco, hold on. Our legal system, he's excited at the door. Our legal system tends to work slowly in really high stakes and complicated situations like this, but it's here. How's the farm bill coming? Excellent question. In fact, I was actually just doing some work in the community today. We've really done some really great interfaith organizing for some of our priorities in the farm bill. So we did some really great interfaith organizing with our Jewish community and our Muslim community, especially out in the Bronx. And today we announced an initiative that we're doing to allow, to rather remove a lot of barriers to halal and kosher food production and distribution. So one of our farm bill priorities is to help a lot of our Jewish and Muslim communities access more halal and kosher food. And that's just not in New York City, but across the country. And to allow people who produce that food to be able to produce it and have access to more grants, so communities can access them more easily. So that's one of the things that we're doing in the farm bill. The tough part about the farm bill, so in case you may not know, the farm bill is negotiated once every 5 years. Every 5 years, the farm bill comes back up for redrafting. It's not like other forms of government funding where it happens once a year. This only happens once every 5 years. So once every 5 years, we have an opportunity to examine our food system. And unfortunately, what that means is that whichever political party is in charge at that time, especially in the House, has a lot of sway over the farm bill. And so the farm bill includes not just farming methods and things like that, but it also includes programs like SNAP, WIC, EBT, and a lot of the food assistance programs that our families rely on. Unfortunately, Republicans have a House majority right now during this 5-year renewal period. And so there are a lot of things that I think if we had a Democratic majority, we'd like to advance much further. Perhaps things like bringing in factory farming and combating that, expanding SNAP, WIC, and EBT programs so that they better serve people's needs, helping with regenerative farming, investing in small-scale family farms. But right now, Republicans have a majority, and so they're trying to cut SNAP and WIC, especially SNAP, as much as possible. And so our job right now, I think, is to try to prevent those cuts as much as we possibly can. Someone saying our family should not be relying on government programs. I'd send my kid to public school. I would love to enroll in Medicare. I don't think that public programs are bad. I think that public goods, it's better for us to have shared public goods in certain instances and circumstances than to have privatized systems for everything. Would we rather rely on community governed or publicly governed goods, or do we want to rely on corporations? Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to that topic, and there's a lot that can be discussed, but that's why I don't really think public, like just blanket statements about relying on government. I think one of the things that is important, I think is an important reframe, is that a lot of this stuff is not government goods. They are public goods. It doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to you. And a lot of times people pay a lot of money in taxes, and a lot of times we naturally ask, what are these taxes even going to? Because people a lot of times are not getting the value and the investment back that they are paying in. And that's because a lot of our taxes go to things that a lot of times benefit our current power structure instead of benefiting more of everyday people. This is why we spend $1 trillion in military spending, much of whom don't even go to service members, because they don't get like the VA benefits that they deserve. They don't oftentimes get the direct treatment and support that they deserve, but a whole lot of money goes to defense contractors. And yet we don't have basic things that other developed societies do, like guaranteed healthcare, universal healthcare. So, things like that. One thing that I will share is that it was announced today that I will be going on my second CODEL of the year in about 2 weeks. So I am going on a trip to Latin America. It is a congressional delegation trip scheduled to go to Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. And I'm very interested. We are slated to meet with many officials and engage in a lot of public policy discussions. And one of the things that I'm really interested in on this trip is to examine and explore U.S. foreign policy with respect to Latin America, and frankly, how we can change and how our foreign policy can change. I think a lot of U.S. foreign policy, especially in Latin America, but also in general, focuses so much on either militarization or a lot of, frankly, extractive economic agreements and models. And I think we're in a really important and special moment right now where a lot of people, I think across the political spectrum, are asking if we really want to do that anymore. And secondarily, if we're sick of doing all of this, the levels of military spending that we're doing and the levels of kind of economic extraction that we're doing, does that mean that we just don't engage in foreign policy at all? Does that mean that we don't engage in the world as much at all? And if it doesn't mean that we want to be isolationist, then what does our presence in the world look like if it's not on the traditional terms of military and economy and, kind of extractive and sometimes neo-colonial economic agreements? And to me, I think that a lot of I'm very interested in exploring foreign policy on the basis of climate and energy and diplomacy, human rights protections, and frankly, how we're going to develop a foreign policy that hinges on responding to the climate crisis as a global collective, as a global policy. And I personally believe that the climate crisis it transcends and touches everything. It's not just one issue. It's going to affect labor. It's going to affect inflation. It's going to affect racial justice. It's going to affect housing. It's going to affect trade. It's going to affect everything. And I think one example of this is the immigration crisis that we have. I'm really interested in how we are going to explore developing a U.S. foreign policy that is responsive to the climate crisis across all of these issues. And one of the things that I'm interested in is examining, for example, the U.S.'s role in helping preserve the Amazon, helping protect indigenous rights, because the Amazon is something that may be located in Latin America, but it is something that we as an entire planet are responsible for. When it comes to immigration, whether people like it or not, migration is global migration, not just in the Western Hemisphere, but due to the climate crisis, global migration and domestic migration, by the way, kind of migration in terms of population patterns, even within the United States, but also globally. This is something we're going to be contending with for the rest of our lives. As places become fundamentally changed due to the climate crisis, some places are going to be less arable, less sustainable to farming and communities than they were before. And they're going to be less livable, and people are going to naturally try to move so that they can live. And this is also, by the way, I think something that we're also going to see within the United States. There was a study recently that talked about how wet bulb temperatures how they are going to be reflected in the South, especially the southeastern United States. And wet bulb temperatures, for example, are something known as it's a temperature where you can essentially die or start to really meet very serious health challenges, potentially be hospitalized, but it's a balance between heat and humidity. So the more humid it is, the lower the temperature is required in order for your life to be threatened. And that can be as low as 95 degrees. Once humidity reaches certain levels, you can be hospitalized, you can die starting at 95 degrees. And we're seeing those wet bulb temperatures and what that might emerge from, particularly in the southeastern United States. And if you are lower income or can't afford an AC, or if there's a mass grid power outage, hello, state of Texas, we saw what happened in winter, but also, you have one major heat wave paired with the grid going down, and all of a sudden you're looking at a massive emergency. And so we're talking about things that even are potentially here in the United States. And I think it's just really important for us to understand that a lot of these issues, whether it's immigration, racial justice based issues, they're narrowed down as black and white in media, but they're not black and white issues. For example, like with this issue of immigration, no matter how you feel about this, it is going to be something that we are going to have to contend with in a major way for the rest of our lives. There is no solving this because the generations before us decided to consume our planet into a climate crisis, and they're still in charge and they won't stop. They won't. And so anyways, a lot of that has to do with this trip to Latin America. I'm really interested in what a climate-based foreign policy strategy could look like, and how the climate crisis can inform U.S. foreign policy in a way that shifts away from neocolonialism, shifts away from our imperialist history, and more towards inequitable history, particularly in Latin America, where we just have a very dark roots in the Monroe Doctrine. Anyways, taking a look at some of your questions here. How difficult is it to shift subsidies from non-renewables to renewable green industries in tech? It can be pretty difficult because a lot of that is written into the law. And so you can't, a lot of subsidies are specifically for fossil fuels. And you can't just take a subsidy and shift it. It takes an act of Congress, and the fossil fuel industry is probably one of the strongest lobbies in the United States. I'd be interested in how people would rank, maybe an organization would rank what they think are the most powerful lobbies in the US. There are some pretty powerful lobbies, but oil and gas is probably one of the biggest ones. Let's see. Just taking a look at some of your questions, y'all. What are key things you want to see in a climate foreign policy? I think there's a lot of questions that we have to answer, both in terms of the US, but also globally in terms of the climate crisis. Probably one of the biggest ones has to do with energy. I think what's really interesting is this intersection between energy and the politics of energy. The oil and gas industry has an enormous interest in trying to either slow or delay transitions to renewable energy. And I think that even in those transitions to renewable energy, they want to figure that out, a way to make it as expensive as possible, even in situations where the cost of production of energy is still going down. It's a corporation, that's their interest. And so in respect to foreign policy, Chile, for example, has one of the largest lithium reserves in the world. Right now, batteries and EVs require lithium, and that kind of can make for really big global implications. It's what I will say as well is that as energy technology develops, we want to figure out ways to develop these technologies in a way that isn't as taxing on the earth. All forms of energy do involve some form of extraction, right? Obviously, oil and gas is by far the worst, and fossil fuel extraction is by far the worst. But we also want to start exploring things like battery recycling so that we aren't just continually churning things out, but that we're able to recycle batteries and not have to be as lithium intensive. But then also, in addition to energy, we're going to have to look at human rights. I believe that we're going to have to address migration issues regionally. And I foresee a world where we have regional migration agreements, and that eventually people will come together and recognize that places that are just not livable become, for example, that just become unsustainable to human life, that we come together and don't say that is just that place's problem. For example, let's look at this domestically. Let's say you have an example of a state in the Southeast that is experiencing rising potential of wet bulb temperatures or something. Let's say we experience a place where in the United States, let's say half of Western Kentucky, for example, starts to become unsustainable to human life. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but let's just take that for example. Would every other state in this country just say that's Kentucky's problem and then let half of their people die? I don't think we would do that as a country. We would have to come together and figure out what we do with these population shifts. Now, I know people may not feel like the United States should belong to the Western Hemisphere in that way, but at the end of the day, we're either going to address these migration patterns together. I foresee this eventually turning into potentially, not saying it would, but potentially regional agreements around migration. And that's just in the Western Hemisphere. In the Eastern Hemisphere, for example, people leaving and these migration patterns towards Europe and people dying on boats, things like that. I think eventually we're going to have to come together and have regional migration agreements. And because people act like when we talk about this immigration issue, like as if the United States is the only place these people are going to. Chile is receiving is receiving large populations of migrants. Colombia has been receiving large populations of migrants. Brazil has been receiving large populations of migrants. And so has and migrants have been coming to the United States too. And so people think people think that when they think about immigration in the United States, it's framed as though it's like everyone in South America in general is just going up. And it is a very narcissistic depiction of the immigration problem, or not even a problem, but just the phenomenon of immigration and migration. It's not just everyone trying to go to the United States. It is that people are leaving places that have become unsustainable to human life for either climate, geopolitical, or other reasons. And the whole region around that absorbs that. So I think we're going to have to come and actually confront that reality. Also, I also want to clear up some issues some misconceptions when it comes to immigration in the United States. A lot of what we are seeing and these depictions of people being like stuck and overwhelmed, and even with the Roosevelt Hotel, a lot of this overwhelm is not because there isn't enough, not because these people cannot be absorbed into our culture, our economy, and our society. In fact, economically, we need these populations. Even, for example, in the state of New York, there are a lot of farming communities and other industries across the state that are saying we want to hire people, and we want to hire these people, and we haven't been able to hire and these people want to work. When you go into these centers, the first thing that they all say is, put me to work, I want to work. And so we have a whole lot of people, Americans, that want to hire these migrants, a whole lot of migrants that want to work for these people. But so the problem is not always a material issue. The problem is a bureaucratic and political issue. We in this country have made immigration such a hot button reactive issue that we have not expanded or developed a true path to citizenship in decades. And the problem is not that people don't want to work, and the problem is not that there aren't jobs. The problem is that if you come to this country, it could be years before you receive a work authorization from the federal government. And let me tell you, as boomers begin to age, and as they enter retirement, the amount of strain and labor it is going to require from, for example, home health care and our care systems overall, we do not have the people to sustain that. We have kind of like a reverse pyramid in our population. And when you see other countries that have had that phenomenon, it has led to very difficult economic challenges. But the only way that the US had averted that is because we allow for migration. And that turns this very real resource strain into this, because we start accepting migrants and immigrants to the United States that supplement the generational shrinkage that we're experiencing. And that can sustain an economy that can help sustain our elders and support our elders as well. So our problem with migration, the reason you see people on the streets and all of this stuff is bureaucracy. It's because the right, and just in general, immigration just gets flattened into this two-dimensional issue of do you believe in, caging kids, or do you believe in an open border? And it's like those are the only two options in our political discourse around immigration. Frankly, both parties are not good at this. I would argue that the Republican Party is outright cruel and the Democratic Party has been neglectful on immigration, period. And it's because the politics around this intersect with race and they intersect with class in a way that makes it almost politically so difficult for people to address that they get spooked out of it. And so the result has been no action in 10, 20, 30 years, if not more. And we are then having these buildups. Things are getting more expensive, by the way, because one reason for that is because we don't have a labor force to sustain the production and services that this retiring generation needs. So, I think I really think it's important for us to have a real conversation about immigration in a way that is not just, this like kindergarten stuff that you see on Fox News. And even if you look at other places like CNN and stuff, they don't cover this issue in terms of the roots and the actual dynamics that shape migration. It's just like pictures of people outside the Roosevelt Hotel or pictures of people, that are crowded in a place, but they don't discuss what this is actually, what is actually going into this. Taking a look at some of your other questions as well. How are y'all not dying to know more about what happened on a lot of people are asking about aliens and UFO, UAP. I did a story about it the day after. So that kind of took a little while. So I will put that on. I'll put my little UFO, UAP story back on the highlights if you guys want to take a look at that. Let's see. Someone said, it's lovely listening to a 13-year-old girl so succinctly distill global politics. Thank you. I'm glad you think I look so young. Also, you should see some, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be nice. Let's see. I'm taking a look at here. Let me take a look at some of the other questions y'all have. Let's see. I'm trying to find some of your questions here. Is Deco a Barbie girl? Absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to take a look at some of your questions. Update on student loans. I want to give a little bit of an update on student loans. So it is August, 2nd? I don't know. 3rd maybe. Anyways, we're in the beginning of August right now. With student loans, so the student loan repayment starts in about 4 weeks. Starts September 1st. And the reason it's starting on September 1st is because Republicans forced a statutory restarting of the student loan repayment program in the debt limit fight. They held the entire U.S. economy hostage, and they basically forced a restarting. Part of that negotiation was forcing a restarting of the student loan payment program on September 1st. So, but what does that mean? Here's what it means. It means that there's a couple things going on. First of all, the Biden administration is still seeking to pursue student loan forgiveness. What they are doing, because the Supreme Court overturned their original proposal, what they are doing is that they are seeking to pursue student loan forgiveness using a different law. So originally the Supreme Court said, you can't do this because this law that you did it under doesn't give you that authority, which is what, frankly, like we were recommending the entire time, to use this other law called the Higher Education Act. And so now what the Biden administration is doing is that they're not trying to use HEROES, which was this is just a legal explanation, but they're not trying to use HEROES because the Supreme Court overturned use of HEROES for that, and they're going to use the Higher Education Act in order to still pursue student loan forgiveness. But that being said, they have to draft that policy and they have to resubmit the proposal, which is going to take time. It's going to take months, if not up to 12 months. We're hoping it's going to be faster than that. So in the meantime, because Republicans forced a restarting of that program, payments restart on August 1st. However, here's the deal. A lot of people may not be in a financial place to restart student loan payments, or at least the payment that they had. So what does that mean? First things first is that the Biden administration has released a reworking of something known as the SAVE program, which is an income-based repayment program. If you are making minimum wage, or if you're making $15 or less, your income-based repayment program could be $0 per month. And so you can still not make student loan payments, and your student loan payments can essentially still be suspended if you are below a certain income level. Now, beyond that, if you miss a payment in the next 12 months, it will not be reported. And so they are giving people an on-ramp period of 12 months in order to start getting back on the horse of making payments again, which is really, really good because your financial life, your credit, etc., won't necessarily be destroyed if you miss a payment, especially because people haven't made payments in years. People's student loan servicers have changed. You have to rehook up your automatic payments and stuff like that. So, however, the one thing I will say is that interest will start to accrue on the 1st. And so though that will come with a cost still. And so we've argued to bring that interest down to zero as well, because there's a lot of people that are going to end up paying down their student loan debt, and then their student loan debt is going to get canceled. And then they will have also paid interest on that. And then the government's going to have to refund that to you. And it's going to be complicated. So, so we've been trying to bring that interest, wipe that interest as well. But right now, the policy as it stands, interest will start to accrue on September 1st. And so while reporting and your payment systems and things like that, there's a lot of grace being put on there over the next year, there is, as it presently stands, interest is going to be there. And so that is a factor as you consider that. I would definitely look into, you can Google it, the SAVE program, or just student loan repayment or the income-based repayment program, and compare your income level to what those standards would be to figure out what your monthly bill might look like. It could be a lot lower than what you were paying before with these new changes. Taking a look at some of your other questions here. Is there any way to reduce college tuition? I'm a really big believer in tuition-free public colleges and universities. I think we've been propagandized in the United States to think that things that are far left, hyper-liberal, like communist, are things that a lot of countries already have. Did you know that in Colombia, public transit is free? The subway's free, the bus is free, and people love them, and they are well maintained. You know, this idea that's like, oh, you can't have free anything. tuition-free public colleges and universities make a ton of sense because we need engineers, also vocational schools, like y'all, we need electricians, we need construction, we need building trades, we need a lot. And the lack of that workforce is costing all of us. Like, we are all paying more money a lot of times because there aren't enough like people with certain skill sets and certain roles. So maybe instead of paying a ton more money because that labor scarcity is so small, why don't we invest all that extra funds, or acknowledge those rising costs and make a proactive investment in tuition-free public colleges and universities so that we actually get the workforces that we need. We are going to have so many healthcare professional shortages. We already do have shortages of healthcare professionals. Having med school be hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of that is not helping the situation. Having nursing schools, PA schools, all of that, this does not help the situation. Charging someone hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get an engineering degree when we need people with engineering degrees to work and fulfill all of our needs, it doesn't make sense. We should have, and by the way, this is not like science fiction. We basically had tuition-free public colleges and universities. And all of these people, whether it's Mitch McConnell or like anybody else who rail against things like tuition-free public colleges and universities, their generation benefited from tuition-free public colleges and universities. It is so selfish. It is so selfish that so many of these same people who benefited from these things when they were younger now call Gen Z, millennials, and everybody else entitled for thinking that we should have any sort of public investment or care. And I think one of the reasons that there's so much resentment too towards our government and towards our politics is because it's not just a personal self-dealing in, for example, the form of insider trading, but it's a generational self-dealing of these folks when they were our age benefited from and wanted all of these programs for themselves. And then as soon as they weren't starting a family and needing a starter home, or as soon as they weren't, relying or paying their college tuition, as soon as they got into a position of power, they just cut it all off for everybody else. And it's ridiculous. And they weaponize our media and they weaponize our politics to make the things that they enjoyed and received now seem like it's science fiction and completely unreasonable. The things that I've heard people call unreasonable, when I know they themselves benefited from similar things at their age, is just like ridiculous. I don't know if it's just a complete forgetting of themselves or what, but it is, it's bad. It's not good. And it's also why we need to have engagement, I think, in our politics in a lower level. And, this is just, it's always this thing, like, people care so much about who the president is. And don't get me wrong, it's an enormously consequential decision. However, people also get mad at what a president can and can't do because they completely ignore the fact that we are governed by a co-equal legislature. And so if your member of Congress is like not doing a good job, or if your member of Congress is not voting well, then it does not matter who you elect president. They will always be limited by Congress. And if we don't have progressive waves in the House and in the Senate, then it doesn't. You could elect a prophet to be president of the United States. In our legal system, that person is legally limited by Congress. And it's just the political reality of the situation. But I do think that the good news is that the engagement that people have had in the last couple of years has really worked. So I'm going to take a look at a couple more questions here. My pup is good. Just did something on student loan relief. May we please see Deco? Let me see if he's napping. Deco! Deco, come. Deco! Let's see. Deco, you want to come here? Come here, buddy. Be right back. Here he is. You can tell he was napping because his tongue is sticking out, and he does that when he's tired. Taking a look at some of your other questions. Mwah. Let's see. Sorry, y'all, I'm looking at some of your questions here. Did I watch Barbie? Yes, I did watch Barbie. Sorry, y'all, I'm just taking a look at some of the questions y'all have. There's like a lot of Barbie questions, but it's just a lot of people asking, have you seen Barbie? And I have. It was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Why do I hate? I don't hate TikTok. I like TikTok. I've just been lurking. Ooh, someone burped. Ooh. Let's see. Yeah, drop in your questions, y'all. Let's see. He's the best. Isn't he just the best? Drop your questions in. Sorry, it keeps like resetting, so the scroll is hard. Let's see. Any suggestions on climate doom? I am a big believer in, how do I put this? Not just climate optimism, but I'll call it, well, I won't call it, this is already a cultural term, like solar punk. I've always liked science fiction, and I think science fiction plays a really important cultural role, because the easiest thing to imagine is the collapse of society. You ever notice that it's like actually way harder to imagine, it's way easier to imagine everything going to hell than it is things actually working out and getting better. And that's where I think science fiction plays a role, because we have to reimagine. Here's the thing. People are reactive, and the challenges that the climate crisis presents to us are going to require a reorganization of a lot of parts of our society. And people don't like being proactive, and I think a lot of people just want to walk as though they have a cardboard box on their head until they reach into a wall, until like the world stops them. And instead of us just continuing to just consume, guzzle, exploit, work ourselves to death 24/7, grind forever, until we drop, or until a heat wave or a crisis destroys our life. Instead of doing that, which is how our government tends to operate and our politics tend to operate, what if we just proactively decided to change before, the earth makes this current way of being unsustainable? And if we make these proactive investments now, and there are so many people doing so much incredible work, whether it's regenerative agriculture, or whether it's passive house architecture, or whether it's fusion energy research. There are so many people that are building the better world. And it's not that it doesn't exist, it's here. And so I don't I don't ascribe to climate doomerism because it serves no purpose. It only hurts. Climate doomerism only slows us down. It serves no real need. It doesn't help us get to a better place. And it is profoundly harmful on an individual level. Like you will get, I just really believe that climate doomerism and cynicism in general just leads you down a very dark path. And I get it. Like I have felt that way in the past politically too. But I never felt better than when I decided to check in my cynicism at the door and give it up and exchange it for what if I try? And I would like to at least go down trying than go down just passively accepting having no agency in the world. And so when it comes to climate optimism, I definitely think like if you look into things like solar punk art, and you'll see depictions of what a better future could look like. I do think we're going to have to make some big changes in our world, in our society. I don't think this mindless consumption is good for anyone. Like when you see these influencers sometimes, and it's not to hate on anyone specifically that has done this in the past. I think I just believe in that all people, all of us, myself included, are always growing. So it's like no judgment or no foul, but you see sometimes influencers online and they'll do dumps, right? And they just dump out like all these clothes from Shein that you wear twice before everything pops off, and someone was exploited to sew that. Oil was pumped out of the ground to make that. A lot of clothes are plastic, and plastic is made of oil. And then when you buy it, you are like, it's not as fulfilling as, we'd want it to be. We're going to have to turn away from systems of exploitation. And what I think is really interesting is that, let's say you are on the political left, right? And let's say you're like a leftist, right? Like you're not just a liberal. A lot of people take these positions or have these beliefs because they think it's morally right, or they think that it is correct or theoretically right. But we are getting to a point in the climate crisis where it's not just about morals anymore. It is about actual material constraints of the system. It's not going to be an argument. For example, the existence of the climate change period used to be like this political issue, and you were liberal if you believed in climate change and you were a Republican if you didn't. Well, the facts are catching up, and now in just 5 years, it's like the Republican Party hasn't even tried to deny the existence of climate change. I mean, sure, you have like little cuckoos here and there, but the overall position has shifted away from outright denialism. Our systems of extraction and exploitation are not sustainable. And by sustainable, I don't even mean a buzzword or a climate word. They are simply going to collapse. And we can make a proactive decision about that. That doesn't mean that certain things collapsing does not actually mean doom. It means we need to make space for a better way. And probably a more ethical way and a more sustainable way. So some things just don't need to be saved. Some things shouldn't be saved. And a lot of these systems are collapsing under their own weight. And we should not have to move heaven and earth to save these things. They're collapsing under their own weight because they never made sense. And there are also some things that we need to nurture and sustain as well. So if you look into kind of like solar punk and what that looks like, it means that we need to change our food systems. Factory farming is not helping our health. Having an insane amount of our food production being done by 4 mega corporations who are primarily incentivized by CEO pay and shareholder value, you're not going to get healthier from that. That's going to make all of us sicker. And so there are some things that are going to have to change. But I don't think that change is going to be for the worse. I think that if we are all invested and engaged and give a damn, that those changes are going to be for the better. Let's see. I'll try to look at one or two other questions, and then I'll pop off. But it's been, I know it's been a long time since I've done a live, so I'm just kind of getting back on the horse again. Let's see. Just taking a look at some of your questions. Why do my parents think we're going to get drafted to go to war with China? They're probably being propagandized by Republican media and a lot of conservatives, because, I think sometimes when, I don't know, I won't say what I would say, but yeah. Let's see. What if that change was worse for the wealthiest and better for the rest of us? I think that's what a lot of wealthy people are very concerned about. Not all wealthy people, but there's a lot of people that have a level of wealth in this country that they, I think, implicitly know is wrong. And they may not admit it to themselves, but there are people that I think have so much that I think even the regular everyday person cannot even conceive of how much wealth they have. And, because we talk about wealthy people and people think you're talking about like a doctor or a lawyer, and like we are talking about levels of wealth that have nothing to do with that. That's like a tiny speck. And I think there are a lot of people with extreme amounts of wealth that have worked very hard to try to justify that to themselves, that have tried to disconnect from their humanity, that have tried to engage in all sorts of political or economic justification. But the fact of the matter is that level of concentration of wealth is not sustainable. It's not socially sustainable. It's just not sustainable. It's also not earned. Sorry. Here's a funny story. I was walking to Central Park. Though I almost never go to Manhattan, right? I was in Manhattan twice this week, which is like a record lately. I usually stick to the outer boroughs. So I was walking to Central Park last weekend, and a couple days ago, and I'm walking towards the park. And so for those of you who may not know, Central Park, I was walking towards the bottom part of Central Park. So I'm near 59th Street and 59th Street and like getting closer to Fifth Ave, which for people who are not from New York City, like that's like the ritziest part of town. That's where like the Bergdorf Goodman is, and that's where like all these designer stores and everything are. It's very wealthy, very, very wealthy part of town. And so, but I'm walking towards the park, and I'm crossing the street, and some guy yells at me, and I turn around, and it's like some schmo in a silk suit, like clearly has a lot of money, and he goes, "You're a piece of shit," and like whatever, like, "Hey, you're a piece of shit," whatever. And I turn around and I look at him, and he was like, whatever, and clearly like going somewhere after a lunch break, like going back to work, and I just kind of like smiled, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, all right, guy." But what I think is really funny is like, he was so angry, and this man clearly quite like very wealthy. Like you can clock it. I worked in the service industry. You can clock people, and not to say, a lot of wealthy people do not dress like super flashy, but you can tell that this man came from a lot of wealth, right? And he's like, whatever, like, I thought his suit was too tight, but that's a different conversation. And like, he's all angry, and he's like, like in the super ritzy part of town, this man clearly embodies like so much of the power and privilege in society. He has money. He's a man in a likely very male dominated space, like, you know, racial privilege, gender privilege. He has a ton of money, like all of this stuff. And he's still so mad. So mad. And he has like we're at a time of some of the greatest wealth inequality in American history. And this guy is still pissed. Like, what? So anyways, I find this very humorous because why would I ever want the approval of some animal in a silk suit in a street that yells at people like that? Like, if there was some dude who was like just a total psycho, it's like just acting just so egregiously wrong, and he has all of this power, and he was like, hey, I really like what you're doing, that would actually upset me. I would say, I gotta switch it up, I'm doing something wrong. So that was actually a very validating part of my week because if you're just like some dude running around in a silk suit acting like an animal to random people in the street, you're not my base voter. I'm sorry. Go vote for Mitch McConnell. Like, keep it pushing. The whole world is built for him, and it's still not enough. And that, I think, cuts to the core of a lot of very wealthy people that continue to try to lobby our government and do lobby our government to continue to stack it in their favor. It will never be enough because what they are seeking is insatiable. It's insatiable. And they will not stop. They will not stop. If you heard lately, like some of these, if you've heard lately some of the leaked quotes from executives talking about the WGA strike, the executives themselves said, we want people to be evicted. We want them to lose their homes. We want them to go hungry. And I think it's important for people to understand that that is violence. That is class violence. And a lot of us, most of us, are living under class violence every single day. Eviction, housing costs, rent. When it gets to a point that it's no longer capable of sustaining life, this is violence. And what people just try to do is put as much distance between their decision and the actual site of violence that they think that they're not inflicting it. But a lot of people are. And I think they carry that weight. And the fact of the matter is we have to organize and we have to stand up against them. And I'm very proud of everyone that is on strike right now. And we continue to support those who may be considering strikes as well and organizing, because the fact of the matter is that this is going to take a level of organizing that is both political and electoral, but also an enormous amount of organizing outside of our electoral system as well. This is not just about showing up once every couple years or once a year for an election. This is about taking power back through solidarity and organizing, and demanding value for our labor, and also changing our systems of ownership. Sometimes people talk about like kind of leftists and they're like, oh, you know, to try to make it sound like really extreme, they'll talk about mentioning like seizing the means of production and all of that. But I hope people understand that right now the means of production are in the hands of like very few people right now anyway. Our energy, like all of our energy systems from our planet is just like owned by a handful of families and major shareholders or private corporations. Like, is that not extreme as well? And it's unelected and virtually unregulated in a lot of circumstances. There is, it's just funny to me when public goods having a greater share of it owned or governed publicly is seen as like wrong, but public goods being seized by billionaires or corporations just to sell back to people at extortionate rates is good. Like, this is the propaganda that we live under, and it's really important for us to name the water that we swim in. Anyways, that's all for now, and just figured I'd get back on the horse. We'll see ya. Bye-bye.